Welcome to The Explainer. So, if you fired up a streaming service or flipped on a television anywhere in the world recently, chances are you've come across a Turkish TV series or a Dizzy. They are this booming, multi-million-dollar global phenomenon, right? Captivating audiences everywhere with high-stakes drama, stunning locations, and just absolutely incredible performances. But today, we're not really here for the glitz and the glamour. We are going to look past all that. We're breaking down the reality behind the scenes, exploring the structural and historical DNA of the Turkish film and TV industry. Which brings us to a really vital question, doesn't it? What is the actual human cost behind this booming success? It's so easy to get lost in the on-screen magic, but looking closely at the data reveals a pretty stark contrast. There's this deep divide between the glossy end product we all see and the grueling reality of irregular pay and labor disputes happening right out of frame. Okay, let's dive into this. To understand how the industry operates today, we'll trace the industrial transformation from the classic Yeşilçam era to today. Then we'll see how TV series rewired the sector, look at the grueling set conditions, unpack the systemic trap of job insecurity, and finally, explore the ongoing struggle for unionization. Starting off with Section 1, the industrial transformation from Yeşilçam to today. This industry has weathered some absolutely massive shifts over the decades. Back in the 60s and 70s, this is the golden age known as the Yeşilçam era. The system was dominated by something called regional management. Think of it like a closed loop. Regional distributors financed films using promissory notes, and they basically dictated exactly what got made based on guaranteed local attendance. And yeah, this created a boom. But eventually, a failure to export and the rise of home television led to a huge crisis in the 80s and 90s. I mean, the industry nearly collapsed. But then, entering the 2000s, an influx of private TV channels sparked a massive modern resurgence. And you can literally trace that resurgence right here in the data. Look at that explosive, steady climb in local film production starting right around 2005. Now, while it still trails behind major European markets in sheer volume, the recovery from those dark days of the 90s is completely undeniable. New funding models, things like state aid and television sponsorships, really breathed life back into local production. And hey, that production boom didn't just happen in a vacuum. Domestic audience numbers spiked dramatically right alongside it, matching the increase in local film output. By the mid-2000s, Turkish films were frequently dominating the top 10 most watched lists in their own country. It proved that the domestic appetite for local storytelling was just immense. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the irony of it all. Despite incredible local growth in both production and viewership, the actual pipelines getting these movies into theaters, they are largely owned by foreign companies. Just look at the distribution market share. Foreign majors like UIP and Warner Bros. Control massive slices of the pie. So while the art is undeniably local, the distribution economics heavily favor international giants. Moving right along to Section 2, the impact of TV series on the sector. So, while cinema had its own resurgence, television series radically altered the very structure of the industry. When we compare the classic Yeşilçam era to today, we see that while the money changed, the structural vulnerabilities, well, they kind of just mutated. In the past, films were financed on risky promissory notes, and major stars held all the negotiating power, leaving crew members with basically zero intellectual worker rights. Today, we have huge network budgets, but workers are forced into self-invoicing systems that treat them as independent contractors. And the defining feature of this modern era? It's for sure the punishing schedule. Churning out feature film-length episodes of 90 minutes or more every single week. You're essentially shooting a movie every 7 days. Which brings us to Section 3, grueling working conditions on sets. To meet the crazy demands of broadcasters, average workdays on set stretched to an exhausting 16 to 18 hours. Honestly, it's tiring just thinking about it. Ironically, this was inadvertently exacerbated by broadcasting regulations. When authorities limited advertising minutes per hour, networks actually demanded longer episodes just to fit more total ads into an evening. The result? Crews working around the clock. Add to this that pay is often delayed, tied to when an episode airs, not when the work is actually done, and a severe lack of basic amenities like bathrooms or warm rest areas on location. The resulting sleep deprivation doesn't just make people tired, it creates very real, documented safety risks on set. To put a human face to this data, let's look at a quote from a working actor identified as BO in the source research. They said, "You sleep on sacks. Everyone sleeps in cars, finds a place, and sleeps. There is a situation of disciplining with hunger for the last 10 years. It's a stark, undeniable contrast between the highly polished products sold to international audiences and the gritty everyday reality experienced by those making it. Next up is Section 4, Employment and Job Insecurity. So the crucial point here is understanding a specific term, serbis meslik mukbuzu. In order to work on these high-budget sets, crew members and actors are largely required by production companies to issue these self-employment invoices. By classifying the workforce as independent contractors rather than official employees, production companies legally bypass mandatory Social Security contributions. This shifts the financial burden of health insurance and retirement entirely onto the workers. It's really a structural trap. Furthermore, because there's no continuous formal hiring, getting a job relies entirely on informal, personal networks. It's all about who you know. A director likes your work on one show, they might bring you to the next. But if a show gets canceled after 3 episodes due to low ratings, which by the way happens constantly in this hyper-competitive market, you are immediately unemployed. This constant job insecurity heavily discourages anyone from speaking out against the long hours or delayed pay because you are just too easily replaceable. Finally, let's look at Section 5, the struggle for unionization and organization. And this brilliantly illustrates the fragmented nature of labor organization here. Historically, Sensen, established in 1978, has been the primary union, mainly representing camera and technical crews with a strong focus on limiting those grueling working hours. But because actors and technical crews have very different day-to-day needs, the Actors Union, Oyuncular Sindikası, was formed in 2011 to focus more heavily on standardizing contracts and securing royalties. So while they share a broader goal of better conditions, their differing priorities shape a pretty complex labor landscape. Organizing in this environment is, frankly, incredibly difficult. First, there's the historical shadow of the 1980 nationwide bans that severely weakened all trade unions in Turkey, a setback this industry is actually still recovering from. More practically today, because workers are freelancers relying on word of mouth, there's a deep fear of being blacklisted by producers if they're labeled as troublemakers. Plus, because they aren't official employees, legally organizing a strike is incredibly complex. Consequently, many workers simply believe unions currently lack the true bargaining power needed to force systemic change. But it's not all roadblocks. These organizing bodies have achieved some very measurable progress recently. Through joint pressure, film sets were officially reclassified by the government from less hazardous to tehlikeli or dangerous workplaces, mandating much stricter safety protocols. They've also published standardized occupational health and safety guides and successfully lobbied for new laws regulating the labor conditions of child actors. So while the structural challenges are massive, there is absolutely a factual record of pushback and evolution here. Which leaves us with this final critical thought. The Turkish dizi industry is a brilliant cultural export, right? It generates immense wealth and captivates millions globally. But, as our look at the source material shows, this glittering facade sits on an incredibly fragile foundation of exhausted, insecure labor. So, can this multi-million-dollar industry truly sustain its global success over the long term without finally securing the rights and the safety of the very people who build it week after week? It's a fascinating tension between art, economics, and human endurance. Thank you so much for joining me to explore the reality behind the screen today. And remember to keep asking questions about the media you love.